We are all afraid to fail. Our fears condition our actions and decide what we dare, or dare not do. We've all had the experience of wanting to do something and then giving up just by imagining that we might not succeed. Today, I would like to help you accept failure. Because the more you are willing to accept failure, the more you will dare to do things that initially scared you. Which means that the more you are willing to face defeat, the more you are willing to succeed. I'm sharing 6 keys that will help you overcome and transform failure. First key: failure pushes you to grow and learn. The first piece of advice I can give you is to see failures as a resource. A failure represents an opportunity to change things. Before, when there were competitions, I was so paralyzed by the fear of failing that I preferred to stay at home and not participate, so as not to take the risk of losing. The problem was that by doing so, I was not giving myself the opportunity to win, or simply to progress. If 2 people experience the same failure, and some time later you ask them how they experienced it, the first person will tell you that this failure affected him, her a lot, that she never got over it and that it affected her self-confidence. The second person will tell you that this failure helped her to grow up, to not be afraid of doing anything, that since then she has done a lot of things that she would never have dared to do before and that this failure was ultimately beneficial. However, it is the same situation, the same failure, but 2 different people and therefore 2 different ways of understanding it. It is up to you to decide how you want to live your failures. The faster you recover from a failure, the less you will be afraid of failing in the future. The next time you experience a defeat, try to understand how it can help you learn about yourself. Analyze how you failed, put strategies in place so that the situation does not happen again. Develop new skills, set up a new process, give yourself the means to succeed. You will face the next obstacle with the necessary weapons and feel much more confident. Try to see failures as opportunities to learn and develop new skills, and little by little these will lead you to success. Keep in mind that the greatest victories in your life have come from previous failures, and that great failures generate great victories. Second key: failure pushes you to be humble. At times in our lives when we are overconfident, failure brings us down from our pedestal and proves to us that nothing can be taken for granted. A failure shows us that we are just like everyone else, that we can excel in some areas, and have shortcomings in others, and this dose of humility is important. It makes us realize that we still have a lot to learn, that we have a lot of room for improvement and that we can grow in many areas. Third, failure makes you creative. Being in a situation of failure pushes us to find solutions, to think differently, to try to do better. Without failure, we would stay in our comfort zone. We would never progress because we would have no reason to question ourselves, and we would always do things the same way. See defeats as opportunities to innovate. If my videos had always worked, if from the very beginning I had the audience I have today, I would have continued doing exactly the same thing as I did when I started, and I would never have looked for ways to improve or diversify. But fortunately for me, my videos were not working as well as I had hoped at the time, and I was forced to do new things, to think of new solutions to progress and reach my goals. This means that without these failures and difficulties, I would not have surpassed myself and I would probably not be where I am today. Fourth key: failure is a seed of inspiration. The most inspiring people are not the ones who got it right the first time, but the ones who were able to transform their failures. Look at every failure as an opportunity to become a source of inspiration, for yourself or for others. Many people take a long time to recover from a failure and then waste energy complaining about it, rehashing the past without even trying to understand why they failed. These people often waste money to compensate for failure. I'm sure you've said to yourself, "I deserve to buy this new pair of shoes, I just missed an interview and I need to cheer up." These people sometimes damage relationships by talking too much about their failures. They feel that in addition to having failed, this failure brings a lot of negativity into their lives and they enter a vicious cycle. Stop feeling sorry for yourself and pick yourself up. If you decide right away not to let this failure get you down and to make something positive out of it, you will immediately put yourself in a good dynamic. Think of life as a poker game. Some days you have a good hand. Some days you don't, whether you are a very good player or an amateur. The difference is in the energy you have when your hand is not so good. Do you give up beforehand, or do you decide to give it a shot? 10 games later, will you still be complaining that you didn't have a good hand at some point? Or will you have forgotten about that game and will you be giving it your all to win the one you're playing now, to outdo yourself? Experience your next failure as a test that life is sending you, an opportunity to prove how much you want to grow and succeed. The difference is in the time you take to transform the failure. It's up to you to decide if you want to take 2 years, 2 months, 2 days, or if you want to get back on your feet right away. Fifth key, failure prepares you to succeed. When you take a step back, you usually realize that a major failure is the sum of many small failures that you didn't notice or didn't pay enough attention to beforehand. For example, if you work on your files without ever saving your work, and you realize it and regularly say to yourself, "It would be nice if I saved my files," but you don't. If one day your hard disk crashes while you are working on a huge file, you will surely experience this as a failure, when it will simply be the logical consequence of what happened. Because you didn't listen to the first signs. It is life sending you a stronger message, so that you can learn from it and improve in the future. Failure and success are very closely related. Take a step back, put things in perspective. Even if it is often unpleasant, even painful, accept that thanks to this failure, you have learned a life lesson. If you see an event as a failure, it is because you stopped the story too soon. For example, did you know that Steve Jobs was fired from Apple? On that day, he could have decided to stop the story and say that he had been fired from the company he had created himself and live with it as a huge failure. But he didn't let it get to him. He started another company that everyone knows, called Pixar, which makes animated movies, and then he went back to Apple. If he hadn't been fired, if he hadn't gone through that failure, he never would have had the opportunity to create Pixar. In the end, if this story is not a failure, it is only because Steve Jobs decided not to stop it when he was fired. Don't stop your story at the first hurdle, at the first blow. Live your story on a life scale and give yourself the possibility to keep going after each failure. The sixth key, failure teaches you to love yourself. If you are experiencing a failure, it is because you must first learn to love yourself. If experiencing failure makes you question your intrinsic value, you don't love yourself enough. Why? Because if you loved yourself enough, a defeat would not be enough to destabilize you and make you question everything. The good news is that you will face failures, big and small, throughout your life. You can then decide to see each of them as an additional opportunity to learn to transform failure, to love yourself and to move forward. In short, failure and success are part of the same game. Learn to deal with both. If a child comes to you crying because he lost a game, I imagine you will reassure him, explain that it's okay, that you love him, and that he will have plenty of other opportunities to succeed in life. Theodore Roosevelt said, "The only man who never makes a mistake is the man who does nothing." I'm sure that in the end, you'd rather be proud of having tried everything, than never having failed because you were afraid to try. So tell yourself the same thing. At the end of your life, you won't remember your failures. You'll remember that you gave it your all to be proud of yourself and live the life that inspires you.